Yeah, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us online and in the room again. I have the great pleasure to present a really marvelous panel today on the Critical Raw Materials Act and its practical challenges. My name is Johannes Waldmüller. I'm here from the University of Vienna, but also climate change advisor for Bread for the World, Brot für die Welt, here for the Act, where I work in development cooperation and humanitarian aid. I will give the chance to all our participants to present themselves very soon. Just a few words ahead. We are going to start off a bit with a general introduction into what is the Critical Raw Material Act, and more recently we're talking also about strategic raw materials at the European level. We will also talk about what critical raw materials mean in terms of backbone for the green transition, and then we will look into what that means locally in terms of impact and challenges that arise also for communities and regions outside Europe, or in Europe and outside Europe. So that's a bit the idea. As you know, probably critical raw materials are very much connected to what we are calling the Green Deal, the green transition. But sometimes we overlook also their function in terms of soft power, diplomatic soft power. So when we talk about access to resources that are used in Europe, we have to talk also about, for instance, access of other countries, other people, other researchers in terms of technology, innovation, or other budgets, talking here about development cooperation. So green materials or critical materials needed for green transition are actually linked to further big thematic areas that are connected, intimately connected. And this is something I would like to dig into also if possible. So with this, we start off. Karin, Küblböck here, please present yourself briefly, what you're working on, where you're coming from, and then tell us a bit more about the Critical Raw Materials Act.
Yeah, so I think I have presented myself already in the first round. Karin Küblböck, Austrian Foundation for Development Research. I'm working on raw material policies and on stakeholder engagement. And I stepped in for Herbert Wasserbauer in last minute because he was sick, unfortunately. So my task that I've been given now is to give you a little bit of an overview. I mean, we were talking a lot about the Critical Raw Materials Act, but what exactly is the Critical Raw Materials Act? What does it contain? Which kind of elements does it have? So I would like to present this to you, and I can change the slide. Yes. So I have a little bit of a challenge because I cannot see the screen behind me, but I have it also on my laptop. So what is maybe, this may, I'm sure for half of you this might be a really repetition because you're all experts on the Critical Raw Materials Act, but some of you are from Canada and from other countries, so I would like to just briefly explain what are we talking about when we talk about the Critical Raw Materials Act. So the Critical Raw Materials Act is the first legal act in the European Union on critical raw materials. All the other critical raw materials strategies were strategies, communications, but this is the first legal act. The Critical Raw Materials Act consists of a regulation, which is a legal act in the European Union, and a communication. A communication is again a strategy, basically. What is new in this Critical Raw Material Act? It introduces for the first time a new category of critical raw materials, which are strategic raw materials. So we have a list of 34 critical raw materials, and out of these are 17 strategic raw materials, which are defined as being essential for the for industry and for the green and digital transition, for defense and aerospace. As you see, the Critical Raw Materials Act has different elements, and I'm going to explain some elements to you. One is, as I told you already, the list of critical raw materials. That the EU has been publishing lists of critical raw materials since 2011, and they have to be updated every 3 years. And you see here, you don't see it yet, that the list of critical raw materials has increased every year, basically. So in 2011 there were 14 critical raw materials, and now in 2023, this was the last list of critical raw materials, there are 34 critical raw materials already, which kind of is a little bit underlining actually our discussion that critical raw materials are more and more important, and there's also a race for critical raw materials in the whole world. And we heard already there's also lists in Canada, and there's also lists in the US and in other countries. So, and now for the first time in 2023, there are also strategic raw materials. And I will explain later what the difference is. And the special issue also about the critical raw materials. Some of the critical raw materials are also one-to-one strategic raw materials. Some other critical raw materials are only strategic in a certain type of grade or type of quality, basically. But the geologists can explain a lot more about this. So one main issue that has, one main element that has been introduced, thank you. Okay. I don't know.
Now it's working.
So one main element, and this is the main legal element also that has been introduced in the Critical Raw Materials Act. Actually, it entered already into force, I think 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, are so-called strategic projects. And the strategic projects are closely related to the strategic raw materials. So strategic projects are projects that have to make a meaningful contribution to the security of EU supply of strategic raw materials. It shall be a project that will become technically feasible within a reasonable time frame, and there has to be so-called sustainable implementation. So there must be a monitoring, prevention, and minimization of environmental impacts, and with different aspects that have to be observed, including respect of human, indigenous peoples, and labor's rights, for instance. If the project is in the EU, it has to have cross-border benefits, and if it's in an emerging market, it has to have mutual benefit for the country, country outside Europe and Europe. The new thing is that the decision if a project is authorized as a strategic project lies with the Commission, and there is a so-called European Critical Raw Materials Board that has been established that can co-decide, but basically the decision lies with the Commission, and the member states can veto, but they cannot basically co-decide. This is quite a new element of the Critical Raw Materials Act. I'm sorry, this is in German, but the other new thing is that the Critical Raw Materials Act introduces concrete benchmarks for a certain percentage of raw materials that have to be either mined, processed, or recycled in Europe. So one benchmark is that 10% of each critical raw material, if each strategic raw material used in the EU has to be also mined in the EU, 40% have to be processed in the EU, and 25% have to be recycled. And not more than 65% of one strategic raw material has to come from one single EU, non-EU. Oh, I'm sorry.
Here we go.
No? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. So 10% have to be mined, 40% have to be processed, and 25% have to be recycled in the EU, and not more than 65% of one strategic raw material. And this is what we discussed before. Is this realistic? And maybe you can say a lot more about what is realistic. There are changes in the environmental impact assessment, especially about legal procedures. So strategic projects are given the quality of being in public interest, which means that they're giving higher weight in environmental impact decisions and then permitting processes. And what is also for civil society quite a change is the public consultation phase in environmental impact assessment is shortened to between 30 days and 85 days. And this is quite a change because until now, for instance in Austria, there was no maximum limit for this public consultation phase, which shortens the time that way you can have objections. Oh, I'm sorry. So this is quite a change that is introduced directly, that there's changes in environmental impact assessments in for the strategic projects, not for other projects actually. Yeah, and my last slide is because I'm worried. I mean, I'm not a geologist. I'm an economist. So my question is also, how realistic is it that the Critical Raw Materials Act will be implemented, and how realistic are the benchmarks? The benchmarks are non-binding, so it's an objective, but it's a non-binding objective. And here we see a map of occurrences of critical raw materials in Europe, and we see there's a lot of critical raw materials in Scandinavia, a lot in Spain, in other countries, but as we also heard, the data of raw materials is quite incomplete, so there is a lot more raw materials which is not explored yet, and one aim of the Critical Raw Materials Act is also to foster exploration and to foster research to get more information about raw materials, basically, in the European Union. So this is an overview, and what it means and the impacts can, I think, be discussed in the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Karin. We should continue right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Is there any really quick, urgent question that you want to raise at this moment? No? Okay, then we continue for a moment. I will give the word to Britta Bookhagen. Please present yourself briefly, and then if you can answer perhaps also a bit what Karin raised in terms of feasibility of
yeah, we're going to have a discussion on the 27th of June. May, on the critical raw materials.
Oh, sorry, there's another topic here.
Translation, what is Delta Erde?
Rare earth. Oh, rare earth.
Yeah, my name is Britta. I am from DERA, the German Mineral Resources Agency. We are part of the Geological Survey of Germany, the BGR. And DERA's task is to inform industry and policy about providing secure and sustainable raw materials supply. So where do we get our raw materials from? This is where we provide information, where we have a lot of data. And I am heading the new unit secondary raw materials recycling, which is another pillar for raw material supply. And the BGR has actually been the first geological survey globally to take recycling into account as supply, which is of course important. So other geological surveys now followed, but we started 2.5 years ago, and I have 4 key messages that I would like to focus on. So the first is data, and you already mentioned that. We even for the primary data we have some background, but the scientific background data for recycling for secondary raw materials is much worse than the one for primary. So we do not have very good data on recycling, on the status quo of recycling in Europe, and from my viewpoint from Germany. We spent 2 years now trying to map recycling, metal recycling in Germany. We just published a recycling atlas, and for 14 metals where we could get some data, and we're trying to establish that for 35 metals where we're working on. But it's been very hard getting data together. So data background, scientific background data to make decisions is not good enough. So we really need to work on data. The second point, or one of my key messages, is acceptance. If you want to talk about critical raw materials in Europe as a whole, we need to take acceptance, and we need to take the whole society into the discussion, because acceptance is one key issue to get everything done. And the third point is we should not play primary and secondary raw materials against each other, because we will need them both. Recycling will not save us, not in the near future, and we still need primary raw material mining. And a lot of the facilities also use both, so we should not play them against each other. They should be worked in consensus. And the fourth one is, where I think that the Critical Raw Materials Act is doing a good job, is trying to look at things together and also globally. Not every single country needs their own facilities for each single raw material or strategic raw material. We need to look at Europe as a whole, and we also need to have those strategic partnerships as globally to work together, because we will not be able to supply everything in Europe. So I think those 4 things, background data, acceptance, primary and secondary, need to be thought together, and again, globally and European thinking is very important. So coming to your question, for the benchmarks, are those feasible? And for recycling, the 25%, we are for many of the, at least metals, we are very far from that. So there is almost no no rare earth end-of-life recycling in Europe. There's almost no tantalum, indium, a lot of those specialty metals. There is no recycling yet. For some of them, it's even below 1% of recycling input rate. So we really need to work on that. But there are other examples where we're already very good. For aluminum, for copper, for platinum, for gold, we have very good recycling. So yes, the infrastructure needs to be set up. Will it be finished by 2030? Probably not, in my personal opinion. But it's good to create the awareness. And I think we've all seen the past couple of years with the Ukrainian war, with Corona pandemic, that we had supply chain disruption. Europe was very dependent and still is very dependent on other countries. So I think the Critical Raw Materials Act is a very important step in trying to at least have a little more resilience for our own secure supply chains. So creating this awareness in society, in industry, in politics, I think that is one important point of the Critical Raw Materials Act as well. And so yeah, I think with time, we will reach those benchmarks. And I think for recycling, those are feasible. And of course, we still need technology, and we still not need facilities. We need the frameworks to make this feasible, which is, especially in Germany, energy prices. So we need to have those frameworks to actually make it feasible. But yes, getting there, I think we will get there. So I think that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Britta. So we have heard a bit about this backbone constellation in terms of legal terms, political terms ongoing in Europe. I would like to shift a bit the focus to the local impact. No? So Mika, Flöjt, please help me with this last name. Present yourself, and can you tell us a bit more about environmental concerns and also community concerns, indigenous concerns regarding these constant need for more materials?
Thank you, Chairman. Could you put my slides to 3 of them? More.
What's more?
This one. This basically. This is northern Finland and Lapland. I'm here from where you can see the Juomasu, Mustavaara, Maanikavaara, that is Kuusamo at the Arctic Circle. All these are claim reservations and claim applications and mining projects. And I, as a managing director of the Lapland Conservation Association, I'm dealing most of the mining projects, not all the exploration because there are too many of them. And then there is the southern one is the Talvivaara, which nowadays named as a Terrafame, and that is the biggest nickel mine in Finland, and it will be also biggest uranium producer of Europe. Without it was not mentioned in the application that there is a uranium. So that uranium issue is also in this southern part of Lapland. Mining exploration as hidden. It's no companies won't mention it when they learned from the Talvivaara that it's better to highlight other minerals first, but then extract all of them when its mine is opened. And the same is in the Juomasu, which all these blue ones are lakes and rivers, and then there's protected areas, and all this. Where comes this black line is a reindeer herding area, so that is not empty wilderness. There is also reindeer herding districts and Lapland villages, and in the upper part of the Lapland there is what is nowadays called official Sami homeland area, but historically the Lapland border goes along here close to Oulu Lake, and also it's not dealing with the permitting issue that. These also the southern part of Lapland people say wants that they have more rights to in these processes about the decision making, that what kind of projects are accepted, what kind of ores can be opened for the mineral extraction, and also that what kind of pollution is allowed. Because now there is no single mine in Finland which is sustainable, and sustainable is not the right word to use in the mining sector because they always boom and bust mines, so they can be responsible mining, which try to reduce emissions and tailing waste and wastewater pollution to the rivers and lakes, and give their shares for the local communities and municipalities with taxation and employing local people, etc. But those kind of things doesn't exist even in Finland, which is also in international media many times said that it's a less corrupted country and most happiest country. But we have a saying in the northern Finland that why these international surveys come into that kind of conclusion is that they just don't understand Finnish and the Suomi and Sami people's languages. So in reality, it's a different reality. So there is a lot of people who are frustrated with the issues, that they feel that there is a lack of power, a lack of influence for these issues, even before the Raw Minerals Act, which is established by the EU. As it was showing in the previous slide, in the EU system, they looked at Fennoscandia, the northern part of Finland and Sweden, where the most deposits are. They of course think that it's most likely the place where the EU can take all the minerals out. But here already the people, reindeer herders, fishermen, other livelihoods and other businesses like tourism are complaining that the exploration happens in their core areas, and also the existing mining projects have caused bad pollution problems, and they don't take off when the mining stop the pollution problems. They stays for the local people problem and the society problem and the Finnish and Sami taxpayers problem. So there's a lot of criticism within Finland in general. If you put the next slide, please. So this is about the uranium projects in my hometown and in Rovaniemi where I'm working. But can you put the next slide? I will show the raw minerals. Here are all the mining projects in Finland. And battery minerals, for some reason, I don't know what happened with that slide. It's almost like Chinese, but there have been Chinese companies before the war, so they have been successfully hacked my computer. So they tried to buy the Talvivaara Terrafame nickel via Trafigura. The Talvivaara is state-owned company, Finnish, which is the less corrupted country. It works. The state mining company works with Trafigura, which is one of the famous company which is involved any kind of corruption everywhere in the world. So also in the northeastern part of Lapland, there is also Sokli mine, what is now owned by the Finnish state company. Same with behind what is around the Talvivaara mine, the biggest uranium producer of Europe and nickel producer of Finland. There the local Sami reindeer herder, mainly the forest Sami and Skolt Sami people and the mountain Sami have been critical because of the environmental issues of that mine, and that there is also niobium and uranium and phosphate, and it would be a big mine. And this Suhanko in southern part of Lapland, that is now in process to be opened, and the local people in the small towns are working with that issue as my job. They try to complain to stop the plan is not to have a real wastewater cleaning system. They just put up the pipeline and dump the wastewater to the Kemijoki River, where the local people wants to get back the salmons which have been away there because of the hydrodamming. So that what was I had more slides, but so time. But there is also a problem about the historical colonialism in Lapland, which has the issues which have not been resolved. hydrodamning of the rivers and lakes, and also the salmons, etc., have been wiped out, and then they have cut the trees by the state companies, and now they come mining companies to finalize the colonialism and extract open all the deposits out, and then the leftovers is left. And as you see, that similar kind of situation is in whole Finland. And now there is in the center of Finland, they want to have a graphite and other minerals for this green transition, which should help us to globally to prevent the climate change. But as an old climate scientist who participated for the UN negotiations since 2000 up to 2009, I know that the climate change is unstoppable now, and it will just intensify. So now when the Africans migrate to Central Europe as refugees, and now, when it continues, the Central Europeans migrate to the north, to Finland as climate refugees, because they have sold the maps and marketing pictures of the clean, pristine lakes and the freshwater fishes. They come up to the soil there. We have to say them that you come too late, these are polluted by the Raw Minerals Act. What is the problem is this, that we have already existing mining problems which don't take these issues don't resolve these issues in responsible way. They just greenwash the mining sector, and they try to be responsible in image but not in practice. And there are a lot of northern people, inland Finns and Samis are really frustrated already with the existing issue. Sorry about it over time.
Well, thank you so much, Mika, for this very strong voice speaking out. Thank you. These are many things related to holding accountable, compliance, migration, climate change, impact on the environment, and so on. Many of them are little heard here in Austria, I must admit. So really glad that you share your impressions and your knowledge. And yeah, of course, we all have to take into account that climate change makes this scramble for resources in new areas even worse, some would say. Others would say deepen it, because of course these regions are more and more accessible in the upper north, but also in other world regions. That brings me to Willem Odendaal. Please, can you tell us a bit more about Southern Africa, what's going up there?
All right, I mean, just a quick observation about this law. It's obviously very Eurocentric, in the sense that its purpose is to secure critical resource minerals for the EU and its members. But what I would like to know, a lot of these minerals would have to be sourced in non-EU countries. And it's not clear from the legislation how it's actually to be dealt with that. For example, beneficiation. So how would non-EU countries that actually need the investment, by value addition, say for example, if lithium is to be mined, would there be an element of value addition in the host country? And if that is so, how would the EU actually support those processes? Because the classical way of how the colonial system has worked in the past, and if we want to break from that example, is how do you actually help the host country to come up to a level where they can actually at some stage in the future have some similar benefits coming from it. Then in terms of percentages, I mean, there's a lot of percentages being mentioned in the legislation, like 25% here, 26% there, or whatever. But especially around what is supposed to be recycled in the EU. So if 25% is to be recycled in the EU, where's the other percent going to be recycled? Would it be in the host country, or would it be in the air, or wherever? So that would be for me another question that's not really clear from the legislation. Monitoring, again, you're dealing with percentages. Are these sort of set in stone? If you want to monitor things, and how is the EU going to monitor these things? Are they, if it's say 24%, would they then reject the process, or would they wait until it's 25%? You understand what I'm trying to say. Then also legislation is not to be read in isolation. Would this piece of legislation, how does it comply actually with the broader principles of EU legislation and policy? Say, for example, around environmental sustainability policies, human rights applications, the monitoring around corrupt practices in, say, for example, the host nation. Does this legislation actually allow for the possibility that projects would have to come to a standstill if corrupt practices are observed? Or would other legislation come into play then? Then in the bigger, broader international stage, for example, Paris Climate Agreement, to use one example, how does this legislation speak to sort of global legislation? And I'm sure that the EU, being the EU, would have thought about how the legislation complies with it. But just from a non-EU perspective, I would like to understand that, especially because it is expected of non-EU countries to also comply to global legislation. So, and in many cases, non-EU countries don't have this sort of advanced legislation. So somehow legislation must speak to one another, especially when you create a bilateral relationship where you extract resources from a non-EU country. So recycling, I've sort of dealt with general benefication, as I said, value addition, just to repeat myself around that. So basically three things: monitoring, how is that going to happen? Benefication, does it allow for benefication in other countries? And then issues around recycling. Just a quick, recap on that.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, really, and also Willem, for your inputs. We want to open the floor. No? Okay.
Yes, so we just have a few minutes left.
Yes.
Because then the next section starts. That's why I would recommend maybe keep in this slot the communication amongst the panel members. I'm very sorry that we promised something differently.
All right. Okay. So yeah, that's true. We have to really keep time. So okay, we can maybe take one or two really questions, but please be short.
Hi, I would like to comment on Willem. So I'm Britta from the Austrian administration. There is no legislation that supersedes another in the European Union. So every other legislation that we have about corruption, about the Green Deal, so the Paris Agreement is within the Green Deal, it is as valuable as the others are. The Critical Raw Materials Act is only highlighting one aspect. In this case, the critical raw materials, how we supply European with them, but it does not supersede all the other aspects. So everything that has been in place and will be in place in the future about supply chain due diligence, about corruption, about child labor, all the things that are in the making or already there, they are not superseded by this act. So it needs to be conformed with all of this.
Thank you. Is there any other quick input, question, concern that you want to raise? No? Otherwise we continue with the conversation. No? All right then. Please, whoever wants to comment a bit about, Karin, maybe we do a quick round again. Yeah?
Just some points that you made as questions for the Critical Raw Materials Act. I mean, you were talking about beneficiality. I mean, there is, as I said, there is this regulation and the communication refers to third countries because the EU cannot impose, of course, things on third countries. And there is this wording of it has to be of like the strategic projects have to be of mutual benefit for both countries, but it is very vague. So it doesn't say it has to add value to it has to contribute to value addition or local content or local labor, whatever. So it's very vague. So I wonder how those projects and how the mutual benefit will be defined. You know, and I think civil society will play a very important role to monitor the real mutual benefit, if any. What is also important is that the CRMA doesn't foresee any additional financial means. There is no new fund or something established. It's just, it depends on member states if they want to invest money. I mean, Germany does, but maybe you can, but in the CRMA doesn't foresee new financial funds or something. And I think, I mean, because I have been describing a lot but haven't been commenting any, I think what is a big omission in the Critical Environment Materials Act is that it has been brought up in the previous discussion that it doesn't aim for resource reduction. It aims for more mining, it aims for more processing, for more recycling, but recycling is only one part of the circular economy. So it doesn't aim for resource reduction, it doesn't bring up the discussion, what do we need the mining for? You know, I mean, we of course we need mining to decarbonize our economy, but there are many other things that we can reduce our resource consumption a lot. And I mean, Austria is one example where you have a lot, our material footprint is much too high, so actually the strategies on circularity should work together with decarbonization and what kind of mining do we need for decarbonization, but maybe not for many other things that we need mining for. And this is part of the greenwashing now of the mining industry, that mining is presented as being only used for decarbonization and for energy transition, but it's used for many more other things that we maybe shouldn't use it for. And there is spatial planning to be involved, the mobility strategy. So this is the big shift in the discourse that I think scientists and concerned civil society representatives should take in terms of reduction of resource consumption.
Thank you. I would like to give the chance also to the others to also. Britta, maybe you can tell us a bit more about the awareness of the industry also about the issues that we have heard. Given that, yes, true, there's a lot of accusation of greenwashing around, but then also mining is within an international context, right? And there are mining industries elsewhere that are much worse in terms of environmental and community impact.
Yeah, I try to make that quick. So, I mean, there is a global race for the critical raw materials going on, and Europe really needs to wake up because otherwise others will do it and they will not do it better. So we do have the responsibility and we do have the capability of provide responsible mining in Europe with high ESG standard, very high social and high environmental standards. I totally agree that this greenwashing and leftovers, no discussion, this is not feasible and this should not be happening and this needs to be cleaned up, definitely, I agree with that. But I think the mining companies have woken up that this is not possible anymore and that they will make this better and try to change that. But to the EU financial thing that you were asking is that there will be, or that the EU is trying to find some openings for money, and but the EU works different. I mean, we always have 5-7 year plans, and so this is why it's still very important. Please go vote on June 9th because this is what is important. But again, the EU will find some, or will make it possible by applying for a strategic project to make it easier to go to banks to find funding for strategic raw materials in Europe. And as for the recycling, as you mentioned, with the 25%, where will the others go? I think we're still very far from that because we're still building up recycling. As I mentioned, for many of the raw materials, the recycling is below 1%. So we still need to set this up. And I think once it is set up, once we have the infrastructure, we have the processes, there will be more coming and it will be more economically because the infrastructure is there. And then the EU will adapt those benchmarks and we will have more than 25%. And again, also for the recycling, from my understanding, it also includes strategic partnerships. So it doesn't have to be all happening in Europe. It also, there's always strategic partnership with mutual benefits in other countries.
Thank you very much. Can I stop you? Sorry. We have a couple of questions before I give it to the word, Mika. A few comments. Maybe you can quickly help me summarize.
Yeah, there's one question about past sessions and accessibility, the YouTube channel. People have been trying to access it, so Gertie can explain that later. There's another question, do Sami parliaments have sovereign right to contest the law with you to veto it on the EU courts as any other nation of EU would have? There's only two more questions. There's a mention of demand moderation within the CRMA. This means that the Joint Research Centre, the body of research that does the analysis on the demand, will do an assessment of demand projections with hopefully including a sufficiency or demand side mitigation scenario. And then finally we have a question maybe for Karin, but also for the other speakers if they would like to comment. Recently there's been a new tendency in the Critical Raw Materials Act to also include materials of which it could be debated whether they are raw materials. This is the case when the Act expanded from bauxite to also include aluminium. But more recently also synthetic graphite was added to the list. Is this a trend that you expect to continue? Can we expect the Act to increasingly venture into the industrial sector to attempt to bring large percentages of industrial activities to the EU? So I don't know how much time we have to address this.
Very little, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maybe Mika can answer a bit. There was one specific one on the Sami power to also veto certain regulation.
At least not in Finland, they don't have the right to veto it. In practice, the mining companies have in Finnish Lapland northeast part, they have tried to avoid entering into the Sami area. In general, there have been a couple rich deposits where they continue to go in, and the local Samis, mountain Samis, are strong criticism against those projects. But as I mentioned, there are other Sami groups like Forest Sami and Lapland villages, which historically have roots of Saminesm and have been assimilated by the previous colonialism. They think that they have also right over those Lappi's village forests and waters, which are governed by the state, but they are not owned by the state. There have been claim that we should have a land claims and those processes resolved before the Finnish state give permits for exploration of minerals, because there might be conflict of interest at who owns the land and who should get the profits and who should have a land decision making of the utilizing them. But of course, and there was mentioned that the environmental impact assessment process will be shortened. Already with the existing environmental impact assessment, there's a lot of criticism that it's not really making in the good way, and it doesn't include the social license aspect, and there is no interest comparison with the other livelihoods, employment, tourism, or value of nature, clean waters, and food production, etc., which should be taken into account. And now the existing Finnish government is taking this Raw Mineral Act and try to shorten this environmental impact procedure. They didn't take into account this social license and interest comparison in this environmental permitting process, and also they wanted to have all these permits in the one desk at the same time, so it's reduced the local people's rights to influence for the processes, and especially if that project is highlighted with this strategic mineral note. And there are several companies who are already highlighted that they will apply this status. So especially in those areas where there is a lot of criticism against the projects, and they are already in my hometown. That is the first. I'm there. I'm a city council member. We have blocked one mining project at my home river, Kitka River, that Juoma saw, which is uranium, gold, and cobalt. There's more uranium than cobalt and gold, but the companies highlight gold and cobalt. And now they use this cobalt as a raw mineral act that we need to open this deposit. But so there is a lot of critical, even this modern society of Finland, we have this criticism. Of course, in international, globally, it's a problem. What we need is what might be good issue from the Europe's Raw Minerals Act is that you should push forward global treaty on mining, or that all these elements of the problems are resolved globally, because this is the Western societies, mainly Western societies, companies which are greedy and using this colonialism all over the world. So it's on the hands of Western society to fix it with the global treaty of mining.
Thank you, Willem. Please, we have to finish very soon. But
No, we
you have
have
a bit
to.
on that?
We
have to
finished.
finish.
There's another session, so.
I'm sorry for this, but thank you very much all of you for your great.